Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Market, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine. I'm Mike Antich, I'm the editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'll examine what's occurring in the fleet market as of the week of May 4th. And one of the interesting consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic has been that it's divided our economy into two different segments. You're either working for an essential business or you're working for a non-essential business. And as a fleet manager, depending on whether you're working for an essential or non-essential business, the consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic is having a differing impact on your fleet. So let's dive in, let's examine what these impacts are, how they differ, and during the course of this conversation, get a good feel as to what is the current state of the commercial fleet market. But before we go further, let's get our definitions out of the way. What exactly is an essential fleet? Well, an essential fleet is a government-defined business category. According to the federal government, essential fleets service critical infrastructure, and they are in 16 different business sectors. Examples of these business sectors are healthcare, food processing, logistics, transportation, financial services, and there's even a catch-all category known as critical manufacturing, which includes a number of other industries such as aerospace, medical supply chain, and so forth. I won't go into all 16 different business sectors, but what is important is that all essential businesses are exempt from the shelter-in-place mandates. Although they're exempt, all of these essential businesses are practicing social distancing. Most of their corporate staff, support staff are working remotely from home. But when you look at what is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on essential businesses, that is that their businesses are actually thriving because of this pandemic. If you look at those companies that are involved in last mile delivery, logistics, transportation, food supply chain, medical supply chain, business is good for them. One of the key impacts that affects both essential and non-essential business is the inability to acquire replacement vehicles. And this is especially impacting essential fleets because they're forced to keep their vehicles in service longer, performing these essential services. But where it really becomes a problem is for those fleets that prior to the pandemic had made the decision to extend vehicle service life. Now they're finding that these vehicles are having to accumulate even greater miles, even more engine hours. And it's these businesses that are discovering that their maintenance costs are beginning to tick upward. Now, if we look on the other side of the spectrum towards non-essential businesses, the key issues there is that most of these businesses have been forced to have massive reductions in their overall workforce. If they did operate a fleet, most of these fleet units are now idle or they're parked in a storage area. And this has introduced a whole new set of problems, especially if vehicles are take-home vehicles, drivers are parking them in their driveways. After 7 weeks of shutdown, they're finding that many of these vehicles have dead batteries, underinflated tires. But the real area of concern is for those vocational vehicles that are parked in storage areas. They're being impacted by an increase in parts thefts. The thieves know where these vehicles are, and what's happening is they're stealing batteries, they're sawing off catalytic converters for the rare earth minerals that are within them, they're taking diesel particulate filters, they're siphoning off fuel, and this is forcing these companies to move these vehicles into more secure storage locations, increasing their expense, especially for assets that for the past 7 weeks have been producing no revenue whatsoever. Another area of concern is in the area of personal use taxation. Since the issue of the stay-at-home mandates, many company drivers can have only put personal use miles on their company vehicles, and this during a 7-week shutdown period. Now these miles are taxable. They're not driving as many business miles, and this is creating a potential tax headache for them. The industry has reached out to the IRS. We've been attempting to get guidelines from them, how to deal with this situation, especially when a company car, because of state mandates, cannot be used for business purposes since it's a part of a non-essential business, and they're mandated to shelter in place by the government. This in turn is causing a potential tax impact for these drivers. The hope, though, is that in lieu of getting any sort of retroactive IRS guidelines in this area, the hope is that the tax impact on drivers will be minimal, since in most cases these vehicles are not only being driven less business miles, but they're also being driven less personal use miles. Another area of concern in our industry has been the state of the wholesale used vehicle market. As we know, there's been a steep decline in resale prices, there's been a massive increase in inventory of vehicles, and there's been a corresponding drop in demand for these vehicles. And what's been skewing wholesale prices downward has primarily been rental vehicles. There's been a glut of rental vehicles in the wholesale marketplace. But when you look at just commercial fleet vehicles, which are primarily late model, higher mileage vehicles, wholesale prices are down about 10% or so year over year. Now the good news is that as of the end of April, resale prices have started to stabilize. But they're still down for fleet, as I mentioned. They're down 10% year over year. But a key reason why prices are starting to stabilize is because the inventory of used vehicles in the wholesale market is starting to come down. And a key metric that's used to track this is what's known as conversion rates. And this is the percentage of vehicles that are consigned to auction for sale that are actually sold. So in the beginning of April, conversion rates were less than 30%, meaning that of the vehicles you consigned for auction, only 30% of them were actually sold. End of April, this has now increased to 50%. And what this means is that the glut of cars, in particular rental cars, is starting to be whittled down, which in earlier weeks were primarily no sales and backing up inventory in the wholesale used vehicle marketplace. The inventory backup was so bad that the inventory increased or peaked to 149-day supply on April 9th. And to give you an idea as to how big that inventory is prior to the pandemic, a normal day supply was 23 days. The good news is, as we go towards the end of it, as we approach the end of April, as of April 29th, the wholesale used vehicle inventory was reduced to an 81-day supply. Now this is still high, but it's much better than the earlier 149-day supply. And plus on top of that, it's trending in the right direction that hopefully is going to provide a better equilibrium between supply and demand. The other area that I like to look at is in the area of new vehicle orders. This area has been the place that has been impacted the most by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's disrupted the automotive supply chain and has resulted in a shutdown of most assembly plants. Almost every fleet manager that I talk to has new vehicle orders that are trapped somewhere in this order to delivery pipeline. When you look at future vehicle orders, many companies are now focusing on conserving cash. They've gone through a month or two of very minimal revenue coming in, and many of them are concerned that they're not going to be seeing a profit in 2020. And this is especially the case in the energy segment. And this area has been particularly hard hit not only by the pandemic, but also by the lower oil prices. Companies in this segment, they've gone through multiple layoffs, which is decreasing the number of fleet vehicles that they need. And some companies have actually decided that they're not going to be ordering new vehicles in the 2021 model year. Now, while lower fuel prices are good for fleets and it's good for the general public, it's not good for the general economy as a whole. Think about it. The U.S. oil industry, either directly or indirectly, employs 10 million people. And indirectly, it employs people in a number of other businesses that are either manufacturing oil equipment or steel companies that are making the pipes, or even banks and hedge funds that are loaning it the money, to name just but a few. However, there is going to be growing pent-up demand for new vehicles, especially as the economy starts opening up more, and also as many of the 2020 orders are now rescheduled to the 2021 model year. The last area that I like to cover is the challenges being faced by fleet dealers. Unfortunately, the courtesy delivery system has been greatly impacted by the pandemic. In fact, When fleet orders do arrive at a dealership, dealers tell me it's often difficult to get drivers to come out there and pick up the replacement vehicle because of their fear of contagion. And to minimize that fear, some dealers are now implementing what they call no-contact delivery. These dealers tell me they wear face masks, gloves, put seat covers on seats, use disinfectant to wipe down key fobs, owner's manuals, anything that a dealer might have handled. Another area that's impacting fleet dealers is their inability to get vehicles licensed. Most DMVs are closed, and on occasion, a vehicle will sit on a dealer lot. And the fear is that once the DMVs do open up, that there's going to be a backlog of requests for licensing, and there's going to be the inevitable lost paperwork that results from it. Another area of concern with fleet dealers is with out-of-stock sales. At the moment, they're impossible. In the past, dealers would often conduct dealer trades to get vehicles needed by fleets. But with the anticipation that dealer inventories are going to be tight, the fear is that it's going to be harder in the future to do these dealer trades to get the vehicle that a fleet wants, which is going to be limiting their choice of out-of-stock vehicles. So with that, that concludes my State of the Industry presentation. I want to thank you for listening, and in the meantime, stay safe and stay informed. Thank you very much.